Dr. Jack is back. We had our first podcast, and I looked for 2018. So that's going on a few years. What a great conversation that was. I entitled it Building Cross-Disciplinary Teams to Bring Futuristic Solutions. In the interim, a whole ton of stuff has happened, including a little pandemic,
Mm.
a few notches and wars. I mean, wow. But for those of you who don't know you, Jack, start with who are you?
Um, My name's Jack Kreindler. I'm a physician, an entrepreneur, and a physiologist. I also dabble a bit in extreme environments accidentally and kind of polar expeditions and high altitude trips, which we call experiential medicine. But essentially, I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor with a 26-year practicing history. Before that, before medical school, I was doing stuff for the web, the early web days, pre-Google, building interfaces for software. So I've had a combined technology and medical career that goes back 35 years, and yeah, so that's me.
How much would you cringe if I said you're a true Renaissance man?
I'm every cell in my body. I don't go for titles and things like that, but yeah,
It's
I
it's
guess I'm
it's
interested in a
okay.
lot of things.
Yeah, it's okay if someone else says it, I think.
It may be.
Um, the thing that well, let's amongst the things that I wanted to talk about with you was your trip to the Antarctic,
Mm.
because you did that with two people I've had on my show.
Oh,
One my cousin, one my friend, Kevin Ryan and Fabrice Granda.
indeed,
So,
two of the.
so
In
the
fact, I can see both of their shadows at the moment on my wall. We have
brilliant.
a beautiful picture of us crossing the Antarctic plateau. Yeah, that was a mammoth trip.
Well, so you wrote, at least you spoke about it at the time, it says an endless white disk of ice where anything can happen, even in the most predictable environments.
Mm.
What did that expedition with those the people with you, of course, teach you most about uncertainty in life and medicine?
Mm. Well, starting with the medical part, the whole purpose of the expedition was to see if we could study the difference between male and female physiology and psychology in hyperendurance environments. So there appear to be significant differences in the amount of muscle mass and possibly also the amount of effort endured by men versus women. So men lose more muscle mass and seem to not do quite as well in general as women in hyperendurance settings. Now, what is hyperendurance? That's a key question. It's essentially where you're working your ass off for a very long time, burning maybe two marathons worth of calories in very, very austere, cold, high, remote environments, and you just can't consume as many calories as you burn. So, and you do that day after day, and that's a sort of a very, very broad classification of what maybe a hyper endurance event is, as opposed to an ultra endurance like marathons and sporty type things. And that was the purpose of the expedition. So could we find out what it was that helped women uh, essentially survive these kinds of conditions better than men? And we did all of that work, but it was getting the funding for such kind of expeditions is extremely hard. The military and academic communities can only afford fairly limited budgets for these kinds of things. So I decided I was going to rope in some of my good friends, two of whom you mentioned, Kevin Ryan and Fabrice Grinder, and we got us six other really great, very successful people, as well as Kevin and Fabrice to fund, along with some other. Supporting funders, a what ended up being the largest expedition skiing to the South Pole. Two of them, a 60-day coast to pole expedition, and the one which I led, which was the last degree, which is unacclimatized, being dumped in the at 89 degrees south, in the middle of this epic endless white disk at 3,000 meters altitude, but it because of the way the Earth spins and atmospheres spread, it's more like 4,500 meter altitude at minus 40
Wow.
centigrade or Fahrenheit, doesn't matter, it's the same. And yeah, and you're dumped there unacclimatized, and it's over to you. Let's see what happens. Um, and that was it was a huge learning experience, both from a scientific and a medical perspective, but also personally. Um, probably the probably the most moving thing that has happened to me and maybe to all the other people in the expedition, apart from obviously things like major births, deaths, marriages, those kinds of things. But it it was an enormous learning. I mean, it's easy to forget. I forgot it this morning, and I'm sure everyone else does too, how precious it is to wake up with warmth and with shelter and to be able to press a button on your kettle or your water filter and get instant warmth that you can make a cup of tea out of, and that you get a hug from someone you love, and that you pick up your phone and you're in contact with the rest of the world, and just all those very, very basic things that we so often forget and have to forget really to get on with more sophisticated things are the very matters that you are reminded of in a stark and frank way. And they do the, those experiences in extremes do seem to permanently burn into your psyche an appreciation of the very simple fundamental things of shelter, warmth, food, company, and contact with people. So, yes, it was not just a study of human physiology, but also an investigation, personal investigation for many of us, into what's important in life.
Well, coming back to the medical experiment with regard to women and men, what I heard you say, and I assume there were some women along with you, was that women endure better these type of environments. So first of all, that if that's correct conclusion, it goes against what we typically say, which is men are the best to go send for a risky adventure, send them out to do the ole ole stuff. Women are better suited to do things in a different type of environment. That seems to be inaccurate, therefore, as in terms of what we've always thought.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of blame it on the ancient Greeks. I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but as a Renaissance man yourself, Mintra, I'm sure you'll appreciate this tangent. The sport, modern spectator sport, and the Olympics and so forth were really orientated around what audiences were prepared to endure for how long. And so sprints have always, I don't know if you ever watched the Olympics, but this less than 10
Of
second
course.
thing seems to be the most interesting thing to people. I mean, why is something that lasts less than 10 seconds more interesting than something that lasts more than 4 hours? But eventually, after 4 hours, people want to go home. They're fed up with buying popcorn, even ancient Greek popcorn, and they're just, it's bye bye. I'm off. People do not have attention spans that are longer than that. And so all of sport has been orientated around quick dopamine releasing fixes mostly. You could argue potentially that a snooker and bowls was is an exception, are exceptions, but in
Okay.
general, men are suited to sprinting, to fast burst type things more than women's female physiology is. But when it comes down to Iron Man length endurance events and hyper endurance, especially the crossover comes at around 100 kilometer running ultra marathon type settings where there's calorie deficit. The gap between men and women rapidly closes. And then when you get into hyperendurance, where it's very prolonged day after day calorie deficit, it crosses over. The advantage of having the strength and the power of, generally speaking, male physiology is outweighed by the energy preservation and psychological, perhaps also human interaction type advantages that female physiology seems to lend itself to.
Mm. Fascinating. So, in essence, there's a body type which is more, which the way I interpret it is better for fast action, sprints, weightlifting sort of ideas, and then the endurance idea, the ability to last longer, both mentally and physically, is something that the female physiology is better at.
I mean, we don't exactly, these are only scratching the surface type experiments because they're small numbers, but it seems as if nature is leaning towards spreading its net relatively wide and saying, okay, here's a bunch of expendable things that can, I'm, I hope I'm allowed to use this language, but you can use, you can
No,
dub
no,
this.
no. Everything's good. Everything's good.
Fighting and fucking and like lifting things and shifting things around. Male physiology is very suited to that. Uh, Surviving long-term migrations, carrying a child in your arms, perhaps also breastfeeding, as well as carrying a child in your womb and growing a new being, as well as surviving yourself and moving for extended periods of time, it seems as if nature is saying, okay, there are some things to do with hyperendurance that maybe lend themselves more towards um, the other half of the species. Now, this is very much again scratching the surface, the beginnings of it, but it seems to make some sense from an evolutionary and survival perspective.
Did you write up a report on this, I assume, with regard to some medical journals?
Yeah, I think we've had 6 papers published
Wow.
so far, or about to be published, and a lot of presentations at conferences. So it's been important work for both understanding fueling, um, choices of who you might select for particular roles in the military, what you might be wary of when somebody's in a similar situation for extended periods in intensive care. Um,
Going
and
to the moon or Mars?
well, they usually have. I mean, those, funnily enough, you usually have enough food. Um, but it's yeah, it's already yielded. We hope to. I'd say we'd hope to publish maybe a dozen or more papers over the coming years, from what we've learned, and we've also really begun to understood the performance of particular wearables and wearables in general for doing really important but difficult to conduct research in hard environments and whether specialized equipment or today's consumer wearables can be used. That's another really important finding from this is the practicality of uh, yeah, the sort of data collection tools that we today use. You may have an Aura Ring, I don't know, or a Whoop or an Apple Watch or
I
one of
have I
these
have
things.
I have an Apple Watch and a Dexcom because I'm a type 1 diabetic. So
So there you go. And we
I do
used both of
track this
those
stuff.
devices. Yeah, we use
Um,
both of those devices. So yeah, that's the other learnings.
of course, you need to have good battery life, which I'm sure in the cold is a little bit difficult. Talking rather than just the physiological components we just talked about, as you know, I did a film about the Second World War in the prison camps and what allowed some of the prisoners to endure 42% of whom were killed as prisoners, and what were the elements that allowed for people to go through that type of very difficult conditions. I'm wondering in your study, what type of things did you observe made for more successful adventurers with you? Are there any things that stood out?
I'm always reminded of two important people who are inspirations to me. One, Viktor Frankl, and the other one is Sir Ernest Shackleton, both of whom talked similarly about the ability to reframe your situation and almost choose the way in which you perceive something which is clearly not ideal. And whether you can enjoy certain situations, but you can certainly find pockets of solace and positivity even in very dark situations. Those were two inspirations which I felt became part of my journey when I was on the trip, and many others on the trip also described the same. When the going was really, really tough, your body just and your brain, they want you to stop, and there's this automatic reflex catastrophizing kicks in, and it takes a very conscious effort to take that natural catastrophizing and to pull yourself out to a different level where you can look at that and almost reflect on what you're thinking about. And it's a like a meditative um, state. It's the sort of thing that people who are practitioners of meditation, martial arts, you know, psychological resilience techniques, they do describe um, this quality which you kind of want in people automatically who come on such expeditions, but you can learn it as well. And it's this kind of true optimism. I think Shackleton said that optimism is true moral courage, and that is I would tend to agree with that. But finding optimism when the lights are out and things are dark and not looking great, and you just wonder, oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to carry on for the next 10 minutes? Or even at the end of the 10 minutes for the next hour, and then the end of the hour the next day, and then the day the next week, and the week the next month. You think, how on earth am I going to get through these next 10 minutes? And then finding that inner strength is yeah, I think that's probably one of the greatest things you can learn in life in general. But certainly, if you have that innate quality, it is unquestionably useful and often leads to better jokes because those people tend to crack jokes even when and increase the optimism even when the going's tough. But yeah, so that was one clear thing. I think one of the biomarkers we saw when we were reflecting on the daily, quite long questionnaires that we filled out each day on how people felt. We scored levels of effort and reasons for people feeling great and not great during tough days. Was the correlation between communication and the ability to share load, both mental load, but then also physically the ability to share physical load, the actual weight on your sled, was a key indicator of how well people did, even when the going was tough. And I would argue that a lot of men versus the women on the trip tend to automatically just crack on, look forward, and they don't sort of think, oh my gosh, how am I feeling right now? How's the person next to me feeling? Let's check in on them. Let's check in on myself. Let's admit that I need some help and pass on some load. That seemed to happen perhaps a little bit more automatically and I don't know whether this is nurture or nature or both, but there was almost a Schadenfreude in men. You see this a lot in expeditions where people just go, "Oh, I'm doing better than you. I'm going to crack on," and it's quite nice to see you suffer a little bit and breathe harder than I am. And it, yeah, I think the expression of load, the feeling of load, and the sharing of load seems to be a critical factor in success in these kinds of environments.
Mm. Most telling. I was thinking about a book in the POW situation where there was a priest called Sidney Stewart who wrote a book called Give Us This Day, which is a beautiful account of how, in the middle of all that horror, he was able to give time to others while he hadn't eaten anything in days or drunk water. And how do you give to others? A little bit like you're saying, have that notion of sharing load, sharing time, sharing communication,
Yeah.
even though you're kind of focused on your survival, moving out of your shell to embrace the fact that you have a community around you.
It's extraordinary. I often find myself, especially as an expedition leader, um, even though I'm feeling absolutely terrible, I really the thing that I absolutely just want to do at that time is to curl up in my sleeping bag and just get a little bit of rest. But you somehow find it in yourself to go into the tent with a smiley face and say, "Hello, squirrels. How's everyone getting on?" Like let's get out the blisters and have a competition here. Uh, Finding that in yourself changes your physiology almost instantly. It's but finding the ability to turn that switch on is sometimes hard, and it's understandable that we can just curl up in a ball and
It sounds like a precept of PNL or NLP. I can't remember which one it is, neuro linguistic programming, how you tell yourself you're in a good shape and that helps you to become in that shape. And yet it brings up this tension between stiff upper lip, showing the way, modeling the behavior, and actually being able to represent the other side of me, which is I don't feel well today. I need help today. And that balance for leaders in general is always complicated because you are designed to lead and lead by example and fully forward and give that vision, give that energy, because that's what you're paid for at some level. You are the top guy or woman. At the same time, if you don't know how to just circle back into how am I actually feeling? Oh my gosh, reveal vulnerability. I'm feeling shit. And you don't go into the tent saying, well, how are you guys, how are all the squirrels doing? You go in and you like a pout faced because that's my real side.
it's a balance. And one of the elements of self-leadership or team leadership, or it doesn't matter, as a just even as a role model, as a parent to children, is that you want to be positive, you want to be the solid ground. But if all you are is an unmovable, unshakable being, then you're also unrelatable. And so having the, the best leaders I've seen, Minter, are the ones who have an uncanny amount of positivity, but also can deeply relate and share their own vulnerability, relating to other people's difficulties, and doing those Aikido moves of kind of swinging the person round from direction of negativity back into more groundedness themselves. But it is a balance, and I don't think these are the things that are easily taught. I think they come from experience as well. But yeah, you can become too leadery and too positive and start to sort of feel like you're pushing people against what um, they naturally are and can be. So coming back to your point about the POWs or the prisoners that you mentioned, finding space for people, it's not just about saying, "Hey,
Pucker up,
let's
fella.
get on with this." Yeah, it is much more subtle than that. You need to appreciate how people are getting on and to show that you actually have emotion and empathy for them too. Yeah.
Mm. Then their words of counsel or encouragement, comfort feel more real. What one of the things that I picked up was this notion of hope. But I wanted to quote you in another saying because I did a little bit of research on you. You said you can't go into the wild without believing you can get to your goal. An irrational amount of self-belief is essential. And as a scientist and a doctor as you are, I was wondering about how you balance that in the irrational confidence with scientific realism.
Mm. Well, if you go into something saying you're not going to make it, you generally don't. It's the most classic example of this, I think, is the extreme example of when you are rock climbing on a vertical face where gravity tends to have a rather unfair advantage over you because you really are not designed to stick to a vertical face. That's not what we were designed to do. And in gecko-like fashion, if you, for a moment, believe that you can make the next step assuredly, you are much more likely to make that next step. It's not that it's outside of the bounds of probability that you can make that step, but it becomes incredibly probable that you won't make that step if you start to shake and believe, oh, there's a low chance I can do this. What we as human beings are capable of is far, far beyond what we generally feel we're capable of. Um, and tapping into that, and it may not actually be irrational. What it is, it's more like it's more like switching off the fear component of your being, which is kind of saying to yourself, if I don't make it, I die. There is a high probability of that happening. But it's well within your capability to be able to do it and not die. So it's less about choosing things irrationally. It's much more about just switching off the probability calculator in your head as to what happens if you don't make it and
Yeah, what
focusing on
if?
what you can. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to get, I mean, where we one of the areas I want to explore with you, Jack, is this notion of the health and performance that you do as a practice. Yet, tying it in with what you do as an adventurer, the idea of resilience is a topic people talk about, but
Mm.
I feel shy away from in the reality of facing risk and facing down death, knowing that essentially we all will die. There is no such thing as anti-death or making death a disease to fix.
Some would argue otherwise, but yeah, maybe in the background of San
That
Francisco here often. I'm not in San Francisco, by the way. This is just a back.
indeed, indeed, indeed. For those of you who don't have the video, you have a beautiful view of the Golden Gate Bridge. But um, the issue here is that I feel as a society, especially in the West, we've moved away from tolerating risk, and therefore, when you don't face risk, when the proverbial shit hits the fan, you're like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world
Yeah.
because I've never been able to face anything. And you, as an individual, have really pushed bounds, and I have to imagine that that has deeply influenced your profound ability to be resilient. And then comment on what you think is the way society is going, and what is your opinion about this idea of tolerating risk and building resilience through shit.
There's a great book. The author I can't remember the name of ever. It's called Anti-Fragile. You
Mm.
almost certainly have heard of it.
I've read it.
Name of the author? Can't remember.
Yeah, we're gonna have to look it up as you speak. I'll
Very, very
chime in
good.
afterwards.
Excellent. Um, important lessons there, which are the kinds of things that if you read the prose, poetry, and narratives of the great explorers, in days where there wasn't GPS or people to rescue you, they talk about this resilience, if you like, or endurance. And I would say that it's important to differentiate between endurance and resilience. Resilience is not the same as endurance. Resilience, if you look etymologically at it, it's re, which means again, and silere, which means to jump or to bounce. And so it literally is once you have collapsed, once you have fallen over, it's bouncing back up again. That is what resilience is. But people think resilience is the ability to endure. Endurance is another matter. I think um, what we do in a lot of society today is we feel that it's a human right to only feel comfort and only receive what we quote unquote deserve, whatever on earth that means. Coming from a background like me, I don't generally feel as if I deserve much. I think the more that we come from a world of wealth and comfort, we probably feel as if we deserve more, and that it's sort of anti-human rights to not be given all the comforts and luxuries that we think we deserve. So culturally, we have not really, in the last X many years, faced true discomfort. Perhaps the pandemic reminded us of what it's like to endure difficult times, and for some, to be truly resilient and to be knocked right down to the very core of your um, self and to build yourself back up again, physiologically as well as psychologically. But in general, we don't live in very tough times in general in this part of the world for most of the people that are listening to this. That is not the majority of the planet, but just talking about the listenership and of this kind of podcast. Um, we think that by falling down, we're going to get damaged and traumatized, but it is only through the process of falling down do we develop resilience. Resilience only comes from bouncing back up from zero. That is what resilience is. It does not come from enduring. It does not come from comfort. It is like when you make a dreadful mistake on the piano in your grade three exam, and
Are you
your ability.
speaking from experience?
Well, I started learning the piano at 47 and I'm still terrible. I couldn't even vaguely pass a grade three. I can promise
Uh,
you that. I can play some shitty jazz, but
there you go.
it's that forgetting the line on stage at your in your first play at school. It's the dreadful mistake that you made where I don't know, you're you slip up and break your leg and think, oh my God, I'm never going to play football again. And you go through those lows and you find it in yourself to build yourself back up again. We don't want to wish any bad things upon anybody, but that's where true moral courage is born. And I think we shy away from those sort of scenarios and conditions, which make you resilient. Going on little expeditions that we know won't kill you, but you will all have your moments. Even the little 3 day things that we do in Norway. Everyone, it doesn't matter how fit, how strong they are, that everyone has a moment. They have a moment where they think, how on earth am I going to drag this sled up this slope, or oh my goodness, I'm so cold, or just fighting hunger, fighting yourself and your energy levels, and digging deep into yourself with other people around you to help you. Often it's you realize that you do have the ability to bounce back, and that resilience grows, and that can be translated into other aspects of life. But perhaps we live in just too comfortable an environment nowadays, both occupationally and environmentally, and also socially, to accept that resilience only comes from falling down, and we need to fall down.
I entirely agree. When I was listening to you, the 3 day journey, it felt more like there was a grayer zone between endurance and falling down in that space. Or maybe we can just pull hairs on that one. But the idea of introducing risk into lives, it seems to be anathema to our current moral compass, because anything that's dangerous is bad. My favorite saying that I like to tout a lot is an adventure without risk is not an adventure, and a life without adventure is not a life. And yet here we are promoting longevity, anti-senescence, and with the hope to live forever or at least longer, which kind of means by nature shying away from risk, because if I do anything that's risky, it's gonna it's gonna break some tissue or break a bone. And by the way, in the examples you were citing, Jack, about forgetting a line, I remember forgetting the first line of my first major role
Oh
in a
no.
play. Oh
Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah. Yeah, and then I had the other one you mentioned where I had a surgery on my shoulder, and I was told I had to put a cross on my tennis. These are things we all have to face. And how you deal with them, are you going to be the victim of them, or are you going to act and come out of them with some sort of meaningfulness? So with that jumble of things, Jack, how do you see we should be changing things in society, and specifically about raising children?
Well, you also mentioned about our risk taking in this sort of concept of extending health span, longevity as well. Um, I'm a doctor at the end of the day. That's what I do mostly. Um, and so maybe I can put your question into the context of medicine. Like, what can we do as society to both become more resilient, less fragile, but also help us live more healthily.
I got the name, by the way, of the author, the Nassim Taleb.
That's it. And so I just want to point out one thing that people are taking remarkable risks within the fear of them not dying. They're not just not taking risks, they're doing some pretty bizarre things medically with untested molecules, experimentally chucking loads of things into themselves. Only a few years maybe before we get the data readout. So it's kind of very bizarre what some people are doing. They seem to have a very great fear of disintegrating thanks to the powers of entropy, which will happen at some point, alas. But are taking remarkable risks for not wanting to die. And that sort of is a paradox, really, in a lot of ways. But coming back to your point, what do we need to do to increase our resilience? I mean, I think, and I've seen that the sort of things that can help us develop resilience physiologically are also jolly good for our health. So putting ourselves through much more rigorous, vigorous, adventurous exercises, not just going to the gym, but planning holidays, for instance, that involve some form of adventure. We call that experiential medicine. It's not just great because you're getting a cold plunge for 3 days in an icy place. It's not just because you're getting a workout and doing high intensity training. It's the whole thing of being in an austere environment, soaking in nature, appreciating deep, wonderful, and awe-inspiring things, and putting yourself in a modicum of risk, putting yourself in a reasonable amount of danger where you're almost certainly not going to die, but you will find yourself perhaps with a tear in your eye and thinking, "Gosh, can I actually get over this ridge?" Those are the sorts of things that I think are absolutely fantastic things to do individually or with families. And we just simply don't do enough of them. So I would say that to develop resilience, you just have to get yourself out into difficult situations and to try and enjoy those situations. So why not try and absorb um, some of nature, whether you're yachting on an ocean, whether you're climbing in the mountains via Ferrata and Dolomites, whether you're, trekking through a desert, whether you're, I don't know, going in a rally in a car across some arduous terrain. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be specifically remote places like Antarctica, but those are the things that we really, really are missing. Rock climbing, climbing at the climbing wall, is an unbelievably great hack towards achieving some of those some of those elements of resilience that I think more of us need, and doing less watching of these things on screens. But yeah, that's more at a more societal level. Gosh, people are talking about, well, is military service something that we should all do? If we love our freedom, but freedom doesn't come free. Um, is that something that is good for society? I'm not a sociologist, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, again, it's about finding ways to put ourselves in situations both individually and as a society that pushes us perhaps a little bit beyond comfort, where we will have to bounce back. And there will be risk, people will get hurt. But is it better to is it better to live individually or as a group of us, um, with more camaraderie, with more social cohesion, with more resilience, with more joy of simple things, rather than kind of in a risk-free, comfortable existence with white picket fences and security dogs who bark at anyone that, you know. is in your neighborhood. I don't know. I've got some views on this, but yeah, again, not a sociologist, Minter.
But I think it's an important conversation, Jack. It reminded of a conversation I had with a lady who was at the time, I think, 98 years old. Her name was Doris, and she lived through the Second World War, lost her husband, and the bombings and all that. And she said something before she died, which was, Minta, I'd rather die living than live dead.
Mm,
And this is a lady who had been hit as a 95-year-old by a car on a pedestrian crossing, and she still had that attitude.
mm.
And I think that it speaks volumes to the type of attitude we have. And you having a kid, we're such in a world where, oh, we need to protect and show care, and that's the right way to go. And there we are now thinking about rugby without tackle. It feels like if we take the tackle out of rugby, we take the risk out of living, and probably end up with comatose people on sofas doing nothing, because that way I won't die quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we are all going to end at some point, and we have a much greater chance of there's much more experiential intensity or epistemic depth to an experience you can have when you're younger than when you're too frail and your senses are dulled to be able to fully engage with it. So if you think of life as just, the length of the x-axis, then fine. Then live your life like that. Be a flatliner. But really, if you
Which is ironic, eh? A flat line.
true, yes, indeed, you're flatliner. You're kind of dead but alive, right? But I very much look at the intensity of life is the amplitude. It's the number of spikes. It's the number of peaks and the number of troughs. And if you extend that very big wiggly amplitude and stretch it out, it's a lot longer than just the x-axis. So yeah, it's finding the opportunity to create temporal landmarks, to create firsts, to push yourself. Firsts create surprise. They crystallize memory. They literally create this the space between um, the days and the years in your life. That is really what extending your life is. It's about the perception of time and the intensity of experience, or the depth of experience. It doesn't have to be necessarily climbing Everest, but it can be the care that you took in helping your child learn the piano. Um, but truly doing that and not just living comfortably and saying, "Hey, that was easy. Let's just retire and go to Spain and sit on the beach and drink sangrias in the local pub." I mean, each to their own. But my view is, and from what I've seen of patients at the end of their days, and I have seen a fair few people in the most vulnerable moments of their life where they're having to kind of face. Uh, the results of entropy, the bad luck early on in their lives, or maybe richly and latterly in their 80s or 90s or even hundreds. The folk who have really lived are the ones who, irrespective of their amount of time, feel very fulfilled.
I love it. And listening to you, Jack, it makes me think this amplitude that you're talking about that extends over time. It's the experiential experiences that you do with your business as a doctor. But also, I feel like that amplitude is actually the collection of stories to tell. And I'm wondering if there's not, like, within amplitude, this innate need, which or feeds the stories that we tell.
Mm. I mean, everything's a narrative, right? We like our lives are the narrative that we kind of construct for ourselves, and in those long epics are little chapters and little stories, and the power to reminisce against meaningful stories that make you laugh and connect you with the shared stories of others, or the I mean, the most fun I ever have is after it's called type 2 fun. I don't know if you know what the difference between type 1 fun. Type 1 fun is just
Well,
fun.
I'm a type 1 diabetic, so that's what my
Not
mind
quite
goes
the
to.
same. Okay, so this is very different to type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, but type 1 fun is just fun. It's
Mm.
just like you go and have fun. And type 2 fun is where it's really not fun at the time, but it's the kind of stuff that makes you laugh and be able to reminisce and reflect and interweave similar stories and experiences around the campfire or the local pub or whatever place you hang out in. Yeah, collecting as much interesting, funny, and intense experiences seems to be the greatest commodity, in my view, the most precious kind of collection of things that you can have. Ideally, if you can share those, write them down, leave something for your kids, for your friends, for other people once this body has vaporized into back into nature, the better. But yeah, you won't be there to remember that. Only other people will. At very least, use this very short flash of lightning of being around on this planet for as much as you possibly can make out of it. I mean, the universe has spent 13.8 billion years making you, Minter. It's a more beautiful, sophisticated, interesting startup than any company you can ever create. Uh, Look after this thing and use it. It's only here for a little bit, despite the extraordinary lengths of time and effort that nature and the cosmos has spent constructing you. So, use it.
I had on my podcast recently a chap called Ravi who talked about, he said as an opening gambit, I am the universe and the universe is me, which is just a little echo to what you just talked about.
I
Oh,
definitely don't think I'm the universe, by the way. I think I might be an incredibly small fragment of it looking back in on itself and wondering what on earth it is. But I mean, maybe that's similar. But yeah, I'm I'm definitely not as big as the universe.
right.
Sure.
Well, he doesn't have pretensions of grandeur. It is notions of actually putting yourself in the place that you deserve, which is a small little infinite piece of a nobody in an existence of 13.8 billion years. But I want to finish just because you're an entrepreneur as well, just to talk about one of the things that you tend to talk about, which is the entrepreneurial genotype.
Mm.
And we often talk in big business, which what I tend to spend most of my time consulting in, the idea of we need to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, we need to pivot quickly, all these things that typical entrepreneurs do. Um, but you talk about actually making or launching a company needs this ability to climb Everest rather than to do 3,000 times Highgate Hill. So how do you define that genotype? Can it be learned? And do you think it's something that could exist properly in a large organization, or is it better to leave without?
I don't think if everyone was an entrepreneur, the world would be a brilliant place. I certainly know that in every business that I've created, there's more than one, there's more than enough entrepreneurship going on just in the founder or founders. You need people that can do stuff, that are extremely happy, not thinking about what's on the other side of the river, or even the river that you can't yet see on the other side of the horizon. You need people that go, okay, if you want to cross the river, these are the stepping stones, this is the bridge, and this is how we're going to build it. So operators are generally not entrepreneurs, but thinking creatively is the glue. So I do believe that culturing positivity, problem solving mentality, yeah, sort of like the solutions mindset, is utterly critical in every part of an organization or an expedition, equally. And yes, building a company is like climbing a mountain. It is not a smooth running track like running the 400 meters at the Olympics in wherever it's next going to be, LA. Uh, it's dangerous and weird. It's an austere and extreme environment, and you've got to be prepared for rocks to fall on your head. You've got to be prepared for people to say, "Hey, I'm checking out. I'm not going to do this anymore." And creative thinking around that to be able to go, we've just lost somebody. How do we now make up for that, or how do we reroute? Pivot, persist, carry on up this path. Take a take a left at Albuquerque and try and climb the mountain from another ridge. Um, it's it's a constant it's a constant mindset that needs to be tapped into. The entrepreneurial DNA is, I think, less necessary, and it is really like nature going, okay, let's create some wiring here that's a bit weird, that doesn't accept that what's out there already is what we need to be doing. It is a sort of risk tolerant type of DNA. And I would probably argue that if we could classify it as a medical condition, it should have an ICD-10 code, because it does result in some psychological and almost physiological pathologies at times. Yeah, we do compromise our sleep and our well-being in order to build and create and climb and achieve. And for what is one of the questions sometimes you have to ask yourself. Uh, and at what cost to yourself, your body, your longevity, your family, your relationships, to be able to create this cool thing called a company. Um, so yeah, it's, do we even want to genetically engineer entrepreneurship into all of us? I would say no. But the creative aspects which glue together the entrepreneur with the operator, absolutely. And that is very much, I've seen that throughout every company I've ever been involved with, is the and every expedition. It's creative thinking, it's solutions thinking, it's positivity, it's optimism, it's that in itself is, I believe, the the real fuel for success, whether you're climbing a mountain or building a big company.
Well, in that, there's this notion of creation, and in creation, you're doing stuff, you're achieving things. The glue that I tend to talk about is making that meaningful, because the idea of making money, making a business, being creative is, as you said, to what purpose? Why are we doing it? And I feel that that's the one that pulls us through. Jack, I'm aware that time is now run out. Oh my goodness. I think we could have done a couple more hours easily. However, I don't want to overstay my welcome. So, for those, you talked a lot about different stories and things you've done, and you do. But just tell us quickly what you actually do, what kind of business you run, and who do you want to call you at the end of this call,
Hmm.
contact you.
Well, anyone can call. I love the more difficult the problem, the question, or quirky the request, the better. I publish my thinkings and musings completely uncut with no AI involved on LinkedIn, which maybe you can share the link for. You can also find me on wellfounded.health. That is our uh, practices website. My main focus today is as the founder and CEO of my medical practice. It practices around the world in about 15 countries, mostly transatlantic. We are a performance medicine service to people who are generally mostly founders, investors, entrepreneurs, purpose-driven people that are essentially all want to make the very most out of their bodies and brains for as long as possible. It is very science-based. There is no nonsense. We help people navigate the wood from the trees. And we've been doing that for 20 years. It was originally called the Center for Health and Human Performance, but we rebranded to Well Founded recently, a bit more of a friendly international modern brand. And yeah, I guess was some of the oldest kids on the block with respect to performance medicine and what they now call longevity, though we would really just regard that as a research domain. There is no such thing as longevity medicine yet. Anyone who claims they are a longevity doctor are experts in treating mice right now. But
Love it.
yeah, in common parlance, people will relate us to the longevity medicine domain. So yeah, that's what we do right now.
And I highly encourage people to check out what you do in writing. It is very stimulating, and I think you're leading a path that's really important, Jack. Loved having you on. I look forward to seeing you soon in IRL. And I'll put all these in the show notes. Lovely parting word for the future of the world. Jack,
Don't die dull.
love it.
Thanks, Minter.